I always got the impression that Sega didn't know what to do with ToeJam and Earl. The funky duo originally debuted as an overhead scavenger hunt on the Genesis, which led to a side-scrolling sequel and a 3D platformer. Now they're back to their old ways, and ToeJam and Earl Back in the Groove, a reboot of sorts that draws heavy inspiration from the 1991 original. It's another adventure that sees the galaxy's hippest aliens doing their best to avoid Earth's nuttiest inhabitants. Do ToeJam and Earl have what it takes to get back in the groove? Or has their extended hiatus made them lose their funk? Let's find out. After narrowly escaping Earth back in the early 1990s, three-legged ToeJam and his rotund buddy Earl have decided to take their lady friends to the planet that made them hometown heroes. Unfortunately, something goes wrong and the funky duo, along with Earth, get sucked through a wormhole and all scrambled up. This means that the hip aliens will need to explore 25 randomly generated stages in an effort to find 10 pieces and reassemble the ship. Now, if that sounds familiar, it's because Back in the Groove has essentially the exact same setup as the 1991 original. And that's not the only thing familiar about this fourth ToeJam and Earl game, because there were times when I wondered if this was more of a remake than a sequel. Everything from the levels to the structure to the enemies all felt like they were transplanted from the early 16-bit games in both good and bad ways. For those who missed out on the original, the goal is fairly simple. You just need to find the missing ship parts. There are 25 stages total, but only a handful of them have parts. So the idea is that you'll have to thoroughly investigate each area of the randomly created levels and locate all the secrets and then find a way off the stupid planet. Of course, that's easier said than done, because these funky aliens are lovers, not fighters, and are largely defenseless against some of Earth's scariest creatures. I'm talking about crazy dentists, inconsiderate construction workers, drone operators, cell phone zombies, killer ice cream trucks, and, of course, ghost cows. There's some new faces here, along with some returning favorites from previous games. While ToeJam, Earl, Luanda, Letitia, and the rest of the gang may not have a default attack, they are good at opening up presents scattered throughout the stages. Much like the original, the focus is on using the power-ups to do everything from race around the stage in rocket shoes, to sprout wings and fly, to toss tomatoes at the Earthlings. The trick is that you don't always know what you're going to unwrap, and some of those presents aren't going to help you. I mean, it's just as likely that you're going to run into a rain cloud that zaps you with lightning over and over than it is to find the far more useful bouncy shoes. The good news is that there are friendly humans looking to help our aliens get back to Funkotron. You'll collect experience points from using items and shaking trees that can be traded in to level up, which will improve your stats little by little. There are also characters that'll sing, sell items, make sushi, and more. A lot of this game boils down to learning how to avoid the bad humans and knowing when to run to the helpful humans. If you don't level up or barter, then you'll quickly run out of lives and have to start over from the very beginning. Now, not unlike the original, there's a laid-back approach to Back in the Groove that feels just as out of step today as it did 28 years ago. That's not a criticism, because I actually like that ToeJam and Earl dance to their own funky beat. The action is never fast-paced or punishing, making this a great game to play when you're getting intoxicated with friends. You know how some games are so action-packed that you have to focus on the screen the whole time? Well, this is the opposite of that. It's the kind of game where you can hold a lengthy conversation while methodically searching every inch of the planet. It's actually when you start to play the game seriously that it begins to fall apart. Much like the Genesis game that started it all, Back in the Groove is a shallow experience that can easily be beaten in your first or second try. The humans are easy to avoid for the most part, and there's plenty of food scattered around the stages. Assuming you make it a point to open presents and level up your character, you should have no problem finding all 10 pieces and beating the game in a single sitting. It's this lack of challenge that makes the single-player mode kind of a bore. It doesn't help that the levels start to blur together after a while. The truth is, most of the problems I had with the original game still apply to this newest installment. In theory, I like these weird and random stages, but there's not enough variety. We get the grassy levels, the sandy levels, and the snow-covered levels. That's it. Sure, that's more than the original game, but you couldn't think of a few more tile sets in the last 28 years. Where's the fire stage with water you can't swim in? What about a foggy stage that obstructs your vision? Or maybe a stormy stage where it's raining and the wind is pushing you all over the place? I mean, that's just off the top of my head here. You're playing through more than 24 stages, so it's a shame we're just cycling between only 3 types. And I think that speaks to a bigger problem with this game. It's just not very original. This is being pitched as a sequel, but Back in the Groove feels more like a remake. Everything from the scavenger hunt story, to the level designs, to the humans are exactly the same. You'll get into predictable dance-offs, open familiar presents, and race through bonus stages ripped directly from the 16-bit games. This is a greatest hits package that forgot to come up with new material, and a lot of that is painfully obvious with multiple plays. ToeJam and Earl have nothing new to say, something that is especially frustrating considering how much has changed over the last 3 decades. You would think that the creators would use this as an opportunity to comment on the changing times, but the sequel plays it safe. There are no surprises here, and that's a problem. Thankfully, there are noteworthy improvements, such as an online multiplayer mode. Like I've mentioned multiple times, this is a game made for co-op, and having the added ability to team up with your friends is a big deal. I also like that you can explore Earth with up to 4 players, both locally and online. The only problem is that the character selection is a little lacking. Most of the characters are just alternate versions of ToeJam and Earl, along with LaWanda and Letitia. The sequel's introduced a wide variety of colorful characters, so it's a shame we can't go and play as egomaniac Smoot or constantly confused Flarney. On the plus side, each of the 9 playable characters has their own special abilities and attributes. As far as the graphics go, Back in the Groove gets the job done. I like the attention to detail that has gone into bringing each of the personalities to life, though I find the stages to be kinda boring. I'm not saying we want photorealistic landscapes or anything, but it would be nice to walk over hills or more varied terrain. The randomly constructed stages lack the kind of personality we see from the humans and aliens, and if I'm being honest, the designs just aren't very memorable. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I wish that ToeJam and Earl were a little more over the top. If you're expecting this to be more of a reboot or remake of the original, then ToeJam and Earl Back in the Groove will probably satisfy you. But if you're open for a genuine sequel that builds on the characters and formula, well, I have a hunch you're going to be left disappointed. This brand new installment not only looks and plays a lot like the 1991 original, but also shares most of the same problems. It's fun with friends, it offers a laid-back vibe you don't see in a lot of co-op games. But it's also shallow to a fault. There's just not enough to do, and the 25 stages can be easily beaten in your first or second try. ToeJam and Earl Back in the Groove is an example of a retro resurrection that shoots itself in the foot by playing it way too safe. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now here's the question I have for you. What classic Sega series needs to make a comeback? Look, between Shenmue 3, Streets of Rage 4, and this ToeJam and Earl game, this is gonna be a pretty great year for old Sega franchises. But let's say you're greedy and you still want more. What other Sega franchises need some attention? I continue to say the non-online Phantasy Star games, but I can't wait to see what your picks are in the comments below. Speaking of Sega, we're gonna have a Sonic-themed quiz going up on Friday, so I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.